Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another plunge into the unexplained? Today, we're tackling a classic haunting, the Perron family case. And, this one comes with some serious star power in the paranormal world, with none other than Ed and Lorraine Warren leading the investigation.
Oh, yeah. The Warrens, they're practically paranormal royalty, right? I mean, their cases have inspired so many books and movies.
Totally. So before we get into the chills and thrills of the Perron haunting itself, I think we should give our listeners a bit of a primer on Ed and Lorraine. For anyone who might not be familiar with their work, what made them such big names in the field?
Well, they were pioneers, really. They started investigating the paranormal back in the 1950s, formed the New England Society for Psychic Research, hundreds of cases under their belts.
Wow, so they weren't messing around.
No, not at all. But it wasn't just the quantity of cases, it was their unique approach. Ed, he was a demonologist, had this deep understanding of, well, demons, obviously. And Lorraine, she was a clairvoyant.
Okay, so that's a pretty powerful combination. Demonology and clairvoyance. I mean, that's like having the ultimate paranormal toolkit.
Exactly. And that's why they were called in for some of the most high-profile, most baffling cases out there, like the Amityville Horror House.
Right, Amityville. So now we've got the Warrens as our backdrop. Let's fast forward to 1971. The Perron family, a seemingly ordinary family with 5 daughters, they move into this big old farmhouse in Rhode Island, hoping for, a fresh start. And then things go very wrong, very quickly. What were some of the first signs that something wasn't quite right in the house?
Oh, it started subtly. You know those little things you might brush off at first? A door creaking open when there's no draft, whispers when you're home alone, things disappearing and reappearing in odd places, the kind of stuff that makes you question your sanity.
Yeah, I think we've all had those moments, right, where you hear a noise and think, wait, was that? Nah, it couldn't be. But for the Perrons, it wasn't just their imaginations playing tricks.
No, it was definitely more than that. The activity escalated, became much more intense, much more frightening. They started seeing shadowy figures lurking in the periphery, feeling unseen hands touching them. Carolyn, the mother, she even started waking up with unexplained bruises.
Oh, that's so creepy. That's when you know it's gone way beyond a creaky door.
Right, and there was this disembodied laughter echoing through the house. I mean, just imagine that chilling laughter in the dead of night, and no one there. It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Absolutely terrifying. It's those details, the ones that hit our senses, that really get under our skin, don't they? I mean, I'm already feeling a bit spooked just talking about it.
And here's the clincher. Multiple members of the Perron family reported seeing the same apparition, a woman in a gray dress with these hauntingly empty eyes. Just picture that for a second. This figure appearing again and again, and those eyes just staring.
Okay, now I'm officially creeped out. It makes you wonder why we're so drawn to these stories, right? Like, why do we want to hear about these terrifying encounters, especially when they involve visuals like that? It's like we can't help but be fascinated, even though it scares us.
Yeah, I think there's something about those visual elements that just amplifies the fear factor and makes it feel more real, more tangible. Like you're not just imagining it, you're actually seeing it in your mind's eye. And the fact that multiple people saw the same thing, that adds a whole other layer of credibility, even if it's just a story.
It's like your brain is trying to process it. Like, could this actually happen? Could I see something like that? It's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. It plays on our deepest fears, the unknown, the things that go bump in the night. And it makes us question our own perception of reality.
Okay, so back to the Perrons. They're experiencing all of this unsettling activity.
Yeah.
What did they do? I mean, did they try to figure out why their house was so haunted?
They did. Carolyn, she's a curious one, and she starts digging into the history of the house, researching old records, talking to locals, and what she uncovers is pretty disturbing. Turns out there's a long, dark history associated with that property, filled with tragedy and death.
Oh, no. That's never a good sign. What kind of things did she find?
Well, several deaths had occurred on the property over the years, accidents, suicides, even some unexplained deaths. But one figure really stood out, Bathsheba Sherman.
Bathsheba Sherman. Who was she?
Local legend painted her as a witch. She lived on that land back in the 1800s. And the rumors about her, they were pretty dark. Some folks whispered that she had sacrificed her own child to the devil, cursed the land before she died.
Whoa, that's intense. So naturally, the Perrons are starting to connect the dots between Bathsheba and the haunting, right? Like, maybe her spirit is behind all of this.
Exactly. They start to believe that Bathsheba's spirit is the malevolent force tormenting them, and Carolyn, she starts to feel like she's being targeted specifically by Bathsheba, almost as if Bathsheba sees Carolyn as a rival for the house, for the family.
Okay, so we've got a spooky old house, a potentially vengeful witch, and a family terrorized by unexplained events. I can only imagine what happens next.
Well, at this point, facing escalating terror and a potential demonic entity, the Perrons decide to call in the experts. They reach out to Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Okay, that's it. We're bringing in the big guns. Ed and Lorraine Warren enter the scene. I can only imagine things are about to get even more interesting. What happened when the Warrens arrived at the house?
Well, right away, Lorraine, with her clairvoyant abilities, she could sense it. A heavy, oppressive energy permeating the house. She confirmed the presence of multiple spirits, but one stood out, Bathsheba. She was the most powerful, the most malevolent.
Okay, goosebumps. Just thinking about the Warrens walking into that house, feeling that energy. So what did they think Bathsheba was trying to do? Just scare the family? Or was it something more sinister?
Lorraine, she was convinced that Bathsheba wasn't just a restless spirit. She believed this entity was demonic and was actively trying to possess Carolyn.
Whoa, okay, so the stakes just got a lot higher. We're not talking about mischievous ghosts anymore. We're talking about potential demonic possession. That's serious business.
Very serious. The Warrens, they got right to work investigating the house, conducting all sorts of tests, trying to gather evidence of the haunting. But there was one event in particular that stands out as truly terrifying. The seance.
The seance. Okay, now you have to tell me more about this. What happened during the seance?
Well, during the seance, Lorraine claimed to have seen Bathsheba manifest right in front of her. And whatever she saw, it was so horrifying that she refused to ever describe it in detail.
Wait, she wouldn't describe it. That's terrifying. What could have been so horrifying that even someone like Lorraine Warren, who had seen so much, was too afraid to even talk about it?
It's chilling, isn't it? And to make matters worse, during that same seance, Carolyn was violently thrown across the room. Imagine the terror the family must have felt.
I can't even imagine. It sounds like something out of a nightmare. So, did the Perron family manage to escape the haunting after the seance?
Well, you'd think that would be it, right? Seance, demonic entity, time to get out of Dodge. But the Perrons, they actually stayed in that house for almost a decade after the seance.
A decade. Wow. I can't even imagine living with that kind of fear, that uncertainty for so long. It makes you wonder, about the long-term effects of these kinds of experiences, especially on the kids, right?
Absolutely. And years later, the Perron daughters, they did give interviews. They talked about the house, described it as, well, terrifying, of course, but also strangely beautiful.
Terrifying and beautiful. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, it is. They talked about feeling fear, obviously, but also this odd sense of connection to the place, even to the entity itself.
That's so strange, isn't it? That feeling of being drawn to something that terrifies you. It's like a morbid curiosity, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we see that a lot with paranormal stuff, don't we? Like, people are fascinated by haunted places, abandoned asylums, that kind of thing. There's that pull, that desire to see it for yourself, even though it might scare you.
Totally. So the daughters had this complex relationship with the house, this mix of fear and fascination. What about Carolyn? How did the experience affect her?
Carolyn seemed to be, well, deeply affected. It really took a toll on her well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even if you don't believe in the paranormal, going through something that intense, that unsettling would be traumatic. What about the Warrens? How did this case impact them?
The Warrens documented the Perron case meticulously. It became part of their archives, the cases that they really focused on. They considered it one of the most intense, the most challenging investigations they'd ever undertaken.
Wow. And of course, the Perron case became one of their most famous, inspired books, movies, countless discussions about the paranormal. But as with all high-profile cases, there's always debate. What do the skeptics say about the Perron haunting?
Well, the skeptics, they tend to think the Perrons either exaggerated their accounts or maybe even fabricated the whole thing.
Right. And they often point to the lack of, hard evidence. Like, where are the photographs of Bathsheba? Where's the video footage?
Exactly. It's all eyewitness testimony, which, can be unreliable. They also question the Warrens' methods, suggest they were more interested in sensationalizing things than in conducting a truly rigorous investigation.
Okay, so there are definitely two sides to this story. The believers and the skeptics. And it seems like the debate often comes down to, well, what are you willing to believe? What makes sense to you?
I think that's a big part of it. We all have our own beliefs, our own experiences that shape how we view the world. And when it comes to the paranormal, well, there's often no easy answer.
Right. And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? The
Right.
mystery, the unknown, the possibility that there might be something more out there, something beyond our understanding.
Exactly. And the Perron case, it definitely plays into that. It makes you question, what's real, what's not. Are there forces at work that we can't explain?
Okay, so let's go back to the seance for a second. We're talking about how Lorraine refused to describe what she saw when Bathsheba allegedly manifested. What could have been so terrifying? I mean, what could be so bad that even someone like Lorraine Warren, who had seen it all, wouldn't talk about it?
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the real mystery at the heart of this whole story. What did she see? And why was it so horrifying?
It's like there are some things, some horrors that are just too profound, too disturbing to even put into words. It's almost like by not describing it, it makes it even more terrifying. Like our imaginations can run wild with the possibilities.
Exactly. And maybe that's part of what keeps us coming back to these stories, the unanswered questions, the fear of the unknown, the possibility that there are things out there, things beyond our comprehension that we're just not meant to understand.
And that brings us to another aspect of the case that we haven't really talked about yet. This idea of residual energy. The possibility that intense emotions or traumatic events can leave an imprint on a location.
Residual energy. Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, isn't it? This idea that our emotions or experiences, they can linger in a place long after we're gone.
Like an echo of the past.
Exactly. And a lot of paranormal investigators, they believe this residual energy, it can manifest in different ways. Cold spots, unexplained noises, even apparitions, like ghostly figures reenacting past events.
So you're saying in the case of the Perrons, their fear, their desperation, it could have actually seeped into the house itself, become part of the walls, the floors.
Potentially. I mean, think about it. The sheer terror they must have felt, especially during those encounters with Bathsheba. It's not hard to imagine that kind of intense emotional energy leaving some sort of mark.
It's almost like the house itself becomes a recording, playing back the Perron's fear and suffering for anyone who's sensitive enough to pick it up.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting way to think about it.
It makes you wonder, though, if that's true, what happens to that energy over time? Does it fade away? Or can it linger for centuries, even millennia?
That's a great question. And I don't know if anyone has a definitive answer. But it makes you think, right? About all the places in the world where terrible things have happened. Battlefields, disaster sites, even just homes where families have experienced, immense tragedy. Are those places saturated with this residual energy?
It's a chilling thought, for sure. And it kind of blurs the lines, doesn't it, between the living and the dead, the past and the present.
Definitely. And I think that's a big part of why we're so fascinated by these stories, even in our modern scientific world. They challenge our understanding of reality. They make us question what we think we know about life, about death, about the nature of consciousness itself.
It's that sense of mystery, right?
Yeah.
The unknown. That keeps us coming back for more. Whether it's listening to podcasts like this or watching those creepy YouTube videos late at night, we're drawn to those stories that make us question, make us wonder, make us, maybe a little bit scared too.
Absolutely. And the Perron case, it's got all of that. Mystery, fear, the possibility that there might be more to the world than we can see or explain.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've had another successful deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling a little spooked. And maybe a little more curious about the mysteries that still lie hidden in our world.
Me too. And maybe that's the most important takeaway from all of this. Whether or not we believe in ghosts or demons or residual energy, these stories, they remind us that there's still so much we don't know, and that there's always more to discover, even in the darkest corners of our world.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this chilling journey into the Perron family haunting. Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those lights on, just in case.
Sweet dreams.